welcome to Unscripted with Ansra and Garima. Now, I'm going to start by asking this question. Have you ever felt like you have trouble expressing your emotions, or maybe even an eating disorder? You know, that could come from childhood trauma, or maybe not. Maybe you're just using that as an excuse, but we're going to get into that. And to tell us all about that, we have Tamsin Pereira. Tamsin, welcome to the show. We are super excited to have you. You know, Tamsin specializes in childhood development disorders, right?
Yes.
You also focus on autism, ADHD, all those things.
All the neurodivergences.
Great. Now, tell me, why did you pick this field specifically?
To be honest, I didn't initially. I went and did finance like everybody else.
Wow.
And then I realized I absolutely hate this.
And then she needed therapy. You're like, I can't deal with numbers anymore.
Definitely. And I realized that I had a really supportive support system, and my family were like, you know, we knew you weren't interested in this. Do what you want. And so I am a big animal lover. So I rescue animals in my free time.
Nice.
And so I went into animal psychology, and then
Wow. That I did not know.
Yeah, right. So I went into animal assisted therapy to learn how animals can help humans with their mental health.
Wow.
And so that's kind of how I got on this path of learning, you know, general psychology.
Right.
And my youngest cousin at that point was diagnosed with autism, and I saw how he used to interact with my dog, and that got me into learning more about autism spectrum disorder. And so that's how I actually ended up doing my master's in child development.
So animal assisted therapy, and you also
Yeah.
do height therapy. So how
Yeah.
can you know, it sounds really cool, but how does it work? Like, what, someone just comes and tells you that, hey, you know what, I'm done talking to humans. I want to, where's the dog? Let's go
Yeah.
for a walk in the park. Or how do you propose? Is it something that they ask for? Is it something that you propose? How does this work?
Okay,
This is so
with
exciting.
animal assisted therapy, I genuinely think that nature and animals play such a huge role on our mental health, and we know this, right? But with animal assisted therapy, so the animals that I've worked with are horses, mini horses, dogs, and cats. And almost llamas as well, surprisingly. But like any animal, I feel like if you have a bond with them, then you need to pay attention to how they help your mental health as well. Like, for example, there's a lot of research done on how a cat's purring and the vibrations of the purrs help settle your heart as well and regulate your nervous system. And it's really interesting, but you should read into it as well.
Wow.
would love to.
Very
Yeah.
interestingly, recently, a couple of weeks back, we were having this conversation with the general manager of St. Regis, and he happened to mention that whatever he was going through, the horse that he had was going through the same. Cut to, he had a dog,
Right.
and whatever the dog is going through or feeling the emotions, he is also kind of feeling the same emotions.
Yeah.
How is that connected? Is there
They-
any science or anything behind it?
I think it's mostly because animals can't talk verbally, that they have this other sense of just feeling their emotions. So energetically,
Right.
they can feel what you're feeling as well.
Right.
So whenever I used to work with horses as well and PTSD individuals, we would like place our palms on the horse's chest and then try and match our heartbeat to the horse's heartbeat as well. And it's so,
beautiful.
I have so many stories which I could
Why
go on
don't you
for
actually
days.
share one of the success stories that
Okay.
that
So,
has happened
there's one
recently or will
time
stay with you?
I worked with kids on the spectrum, and we had mini horses, not ponies, mini horses.
Okay.
And we lined them up, and each of us with our kid that we were assigned had to go to each of these horses and introduce ourselves. And then we had to kind of, you know, get back in a group and talk about which horse we have picked. And this
Okay.
was insane, but the horse picked the child. And
Oh,
you know how we
wow.
saw it is what, like, the horses would not really nudge any of the children except for one child, and each horse did it to one individual child.
Whoa.
And so when we came back and discussed the names that we had picked for the horses, we realized that nobody had picked the same horse. So it was the horse that picked the child and not the other way around. And I thought that was amazing
Yeah,
to see.
no, very
Beautiful.
Yeah,
fascinating.
and I've had a kid on the spectrum who was nonverbal, who ended up actually speaking to the horse because socially he could not do this with other humans, but he was sitting there talking to the horse, telling the horse that she's beautiful and he loved her, and the mom and the grandma were just crying in the corner. It was a really beautiful moment. So I think a lot of people need to pay attention to how big of an impact animals can have on our mental health.
Right.
And that there's healing in so many different ways, not
Yes.
just therapy. And I say this
Right.
as a therapist as well, like
Right.
get out of that bubble and find other ways of healing,
Right.
not just talk therapy.
Oh my goodness, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, coming back to the neurodevelopment divergence, is it different from disorders? How? in terms of
I try
definition?
not to say disorders as much, and that's just a personal belief because it makes you feel like you have something wrong with you, like a
Yeah.
disorder, right? I like the term neurodivergence because, and I say this all the time to clients as well, is that nobody's normal or whatever normal or perfect is. Like,
all have
yeah,
our-
we all tend to mask a lot, which is like you
Yeah.
pretend to be what this normal category is, and nobody really fits into that box, right? But I think the world and like schools and businesses make you want to fit into that box, and the people who stick out of that box are the ones who are able to set boundaries, who are
Yeah.
activists, who talk, they have their heart on their sleeve and they say what they want to say. And I think those are people who are very self-aware, who are able to make better energetic connections with other people. And I just think that neurodivergence is something that we all need to actually dip into and understand, and not just like self-diagnose from TikTok or any,
Yeah,
any
the
like,
self-diagnosis is the worst.
yeah.
I have a question here. I studied a little psychology back in my graduation days.
Yeah.
And there is a time or there is an age group where the memories that you have or the experiences that you have, they stay forever with you.
Okay.
Right? So is there an age that you say is the most crucial age that they should be really taken care of at this time? You would say?
I wouldn't pick a crucial age. I think that
Okay.
I think there's so many other factors that we don't take into account sometimes.
Okay.
Like people that go through trauma or like
Right.
certain experiences, and there's
Right.
like variables like your family and social connections where I don't think you can pick one certain amount of time in your life where you have to take extra care of yourself. I think we should be doing that all the time, like
That's true.
constantly.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
But
Yeah.
it's hard. It's
Yeah.
super difficult to do that
Yeah.
because we have a lot to juggle
Yeah.
along with our mental health and work and life in general. But no, I definitely don't think it's
Okay, so
one
let me
particular
put this
time.
differently. Mental health is getting a lot of attention these days, unlike how it was 10 years back or 15 years back. People are giving it a lot of importance. And right from your childhood, it is very important, right? What are the certain ways where you can have this healthy relationship between the parents and the children? Now, why I ask this is that, what happens is that every parent wants to be a friend to their children at the end of it. Okay. But the minute the child starts sharing everything, suddenly the parent mode comes out. That,
Right.
So how do you actually strike that balance, or what are the signs that they should be looking for, and how can you really keep it healthy?
Okay, for this, I'm gonna have to explain what generational
You have all the
trauma
time.
is to start
You have all
off
the
with.
time, go
But
for it.
do you guys know what generational trauma is?
No.
Explain.
So it's literally what it is, like trauma that's passed on from generation to generation. Like let's say our grandparents had to go through what they went through, and then they didn't really heal as much in a way that they should have. And so then they would birth kids where they were thinking that they did the best that they could as parents. But
Yeah.
obviously you can be a perfect parent. You mess up along the way, whatever happens. Your children then end up having children as well, and then that trauma gets passed on from one generation to another. That's like the simplest way I could explain it, right? Now, I think that generational trauma can't be fully avoided because we as individuals are flawed. And we're bound to make mistakes. And I think the trick is for a lot of people, what we don't realize is that we need to be more self-aware and acknowledge how we are flawed, and what changes we can make going forward. As humans, we have the ability to change our habits, replace habits, delete habits. But a lot of people don't actually want to have that conversation. Right? It's a difficult conversation to have. It's easier to just kind of sit in our uncomfortable position and just be like, I don't care, I'm not going to change anything about myself, and I'm good the way I am. So it takes a lot of work, right? So going back to your question, I think that a lot of parents need to recognize that they have their own faults, because I think a lot of times parents pretend to be like perfect to their
yeah.
children. Like, I'll ask you guys, growing up, did your parents ever admit that they did make mistakes? Did they ever apologize to you guys?
I don't remember any.
Right? And I've
Yeah.
had these conversations with my parents as an adult, and we've grown together, which is amazing. But not everybody has that
Yeah.
privilege, right?
Yeah.
Which is why I think like my parents are really self-aware and were able to acknowledge, go back, analyze, and be like, oh yeah, we're sorry we did that to you as a child,
Oh.
but going forward, we're going to make this change. And I think those are important conversations that we need to have. And unfortunately, not everyone can have it with their parents. So I think that parents cannot strike this perfect balance of a friend and a parent. I think it takes growth from the parent and the child as well. And so parents need to recognize that they are also constantly growing at the same time that their child is growing as well, right? And
Right.
to be able
So are
to
you trying to say that healthy conversation really helps?
yes,
Where
100%.
where you actually admit and acknowledge what you're also feeling, because I
Yeah.
feel, to give them also the benefit of doubt, a lot of parents are also the first time parents also, so for them also it's happening for the first time, a lot of
Yeah.
things as what the child is going through.
Definitely.
So just to reach that level where you're just
Exactly.
trying to be perfect in everything
Yeah.
that you're doing is quite a
Yeah.
pressure.
Yeah, as a psychologist, like I do parent counseling as well, so I
Oh,
have
nice.
conversations with first time parents. I've had parents come up to me and say, I'm so terrified that I'm going to make this mistake.
Yeah.
And I always say, make the mistake and then acknowledge it with your child. Have that conversation, because that's how you're going to build a stronger bond, rather than pretending like you're right because your ego is too big to apologize to your child, right? And children, on the other hand, as a child psychologist, I feel like so many of them say that nobody listens to them. Sometimes you just want to be heard, you want to
Yeah.
just vent to your parent, and a lot of times parents don't hold that space for their kids because they're like, we provide you with everything,
Yeah.
your life should
All
be
you have to do
great,
is
Yeah.
listen.
like, just study and
Yeah.
go to school and eat your food on time. But
Yeah.
there's so much more to that, which
Right.
we can get into at a later point. But yeah, to answer your question, I definitely don't think there's a healthy 50-50 balance. I think parents need to be able to come home from work sometimes when they're having a bad day and just be like, my day was so bad, I need space to myself, because then you're modeling that behavior for your child.
Right.
Because like, think about us as adults. Who has taught us when we were kids, when we had a bad day, what to do after that? We don't know what to do, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes now I'll see adult clients who are like, oh yeah, we had no idea what to do as children, and then we carry that into our adulthood, and now we also don't know what to do. So they're learning freshly as adults what to do, to help their inner child as
So if
well.
you want to be a friend, you really have to treat
Yeah.
them as a real friend,
Yeah.
where you actually share not just the good but the bad
Yeah,
experiences
definitely.
as well,
All
and
your
then have a
emotions.
discussion and all your emotions. Yeah,
So
fantastic.
here's the funny story, right? This whole thing about children actually communicating, our generation or next generation or whatever, I think they're also a little bit more aware than parents, grandparents. They see a lot, they read a lot. They're like, okay, this is a sign, this is that. But the problem is, I also feel that they self-diagnose.
Yep.
They just, oh, I relate to this. This is probably me. This is probably an issue that I have. And we had gone for this. I was telling Karma earlier, we'd gone
Yeah.
for this little workshop where it was a room full of, I don't know if I should say this, but rich spoiled brats.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm just going to be open. And the issues they had were first world problems. They weren't like, just sitting back
Right.
and I don't know if I was just being skeptical about the entire thing or, but it was what it was. It was first world problems. Okay, a couple of them might have had serious issues. How do you deal with that? Because sometimes it's not like a legit problem. They just want to feel, they want to put it on childhood trauma.
Right.
They just want to be like, oh, I'm acting like this because, I don't know, I got yelled at. Everybody got yelled at as a kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Okay, so I always say I'm a non-traditional, culturally competent therapist, right? And I think like understanding our privilege is part of our self-awareness, like understanding where you come from, what you're able to actually process and do in your life, right? I don't think self-diagnosis all the way is a bad thing, because there are a lot of there's definitely groups of people who are not as privileged enough to go seek mental health therapy and get that help, which I understand. So if you do watch videos and you're like, I relate to that, great. If you're able to actually figure out what to do with yourself, great. But if you're going to use it as an excuse, that's no good, right? So I can watch a billion TikTok videos and then be like, oh, I definitely have this. Okay, but then what? What am I doing to be a better person? What am I doing to help myself? Am I just going to use it as an excuse and say, oh, I'm like this, I'm like being really mean right now because of my childhood trauma? At the end of the day, we all have choices, right? So let's say if I want to talk about like my childhood trauma, I can say I could use that as an excuse for life. But if I'm a lot more self-aware, if I'm like, I understand that this is where I'm coming from, so now I'm consciously choosing how to communicate with people, how to interact with my environment, and then make better choices, not only for myself, but for people around me, that is a self-aware, conscious individual, right? So not completely bad to self-diagnose. I think it's good to like understand yourself, but not use it as an excuse.
Fair.
You happen to mention multiple times about self-awareness, about acknowledging the emotions that you're going through. Are there any particular practices that you would suggest or advise that this is on a daily basis that you can incorporate apart from meditation?
Yes.
And
I love this question, okay, because my friends joke about this all the time, because anytime I interact with someone, they were like, you know, that person was not a good person. Why'd you talk? And I was like, for research. For research. And I was like, yeah, I did lunch with this person for research. And okay, not to like, for anyone who's listening to this, like, please hang out with me. It's not all research. But there are times I will put myself in situations where I'm like trying to understand myself and why I would react this way. And I think like my brain works that way as an ADHD individual. Like, I want
we're gonna
to
get on that.
Yeah,
Next.
I want to understand, and that's just my own personal thing. But I want to understand why I work the way I work, and that takes
That's
effort.
overthinking.
Not necessarily. Like, I enjoy it. So
Okay.
for me, I'm like, great. If my overthinking was leading into like anxious thoughts where I was not getting any work done, sure, then I know it's a
Okay.
bad thing. But I'm at that point right now where I've done the work for myself, and I'm still doing the work for myself because I'm constantly growing. But I also understand where I need to draw the line with how much research I do versus you know, just actually being more self-aware and understanding. And self-awareness doesn't mean I'm a completely healed, great person. Like, I have my flaws, but I now am aware of my flaws. So if I feel like something is triggering me, I now know to pull myself out of that situation,
Yeah.
or what to do after, you
Yeah.
know?
Is there
Yeah.
a practice or like a tool that you use that has always worked with your, can I call them patients?
Clients, I say
Clients.
clients. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I don't think I'm using the right word here.
A tool in what sense? Like,
Something that has always worked, an advice you've given them or something you've told them or maybe a test,
Yes.
something that has
Okay.
always worked.
okay, there's two things actually that I say this to all my clients so they would all recognize this. One is that you're constantly growing and changing and evolving, right? Which is the self-awareness part. So nothing is ever permanent, right? Maybe like we would look at our trauma in the past as permanent, but how we perceive it as we get older, it changes. That shifts
Right.
and changes. So we can't take away bad things that have happened to us, but how we view it going forward, that's going to change because we're changing, right? So that's one thing. The second is that emotions are not the problem. Our reaction to it is the problem,
Oh,
Wow.
nice.
right? So if something is making you mad, get mad. But if you're going to punch a wall after that, that's not helping you. If you're going to communicate and say, hey, that's making me angry, I don't want to interact with you, and you move away, that's a healthy reaction. So I tend not to say good and bad. I tend to say healthy and unhealthy. Because like as an anxious child, I would like bite my nails, and that was an unhealthy reaction, but at that time it was helping me regulate, so I continued doing it.
Right.
But now I've found healthier versions to help me when I'm feeling anxious.
Your nails
right?
look fine.
Get them off camera. But yeah, I feel like that would really help
Right.
people understand, you know, because you're then making a choice how you want to react. And you don't always have to react in the best way. Sometimes you might yell because you're human. Go ahead and yell. But then you come back and you're like, hey, I'm sorry I yelled.
Yeah.
This is how I should have, you know, spoken to you. And this is what I have a problem with, is a better, healthier reaction.
I had a
Yeah.
friend who I think who went for therapy for about a year, 2 years, like extended period of time.
Yeah.
And she told me one thing, and I want to ask you if that's actually true or not. She said that your therapist is not going to give you the solution to your problem. They're going
Yeah.
to ask you the right questions so you figure that answer out yourself.
Yes, exactly. I always say I'm just like, I'm your guide, right, through life. So there are times, actually, my thoughts are actually diverging to this show called Shrinking. I don't know if you've watched it, but
haven't
it's
seen it
about a
yet.
therapist. And at one point he snaps and he just tells his client, he's like, oh my God, just break up with your boyfriend or whatever. And
That's when you realize.
and she's like, what? And then she goes ahead and does it. But like the whole show is absolutely messy and fun. And there are times I want to tell my client, like, oh my God, like it's right there. The solution is right there. But as a trained therapist, as a trained professional, like I cannot tell you what to do. You're going to have to figure that out yourself. Once again, back to self-awareness, right? If you're not aware what to do, even with people who come into sessions, if you don't know why you need therapy, then it's absolutely pointless. Sometimes
right.
I'll see parents force their kids to come to therapy and they don't want to be there, and I'm like, why are we wasting everyone's time?
Yeah.
You need to do the work to understand, oh wait, I do need help in this, and then I'm seeking help. That's the best way to go forward, because if you're going to force therapy down your throat, it's not helpful.
But a bigger chunk also depends on the therapist, I feel. I mean, like, what they say is that one thing is going for therapy, the other thing is finding the right therapist for you.
Yes.
So what are the signs, or what are the things that you should look for? First, it's sorted in your head that, okay, fine, I'm going to do therapy and I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
Clear, sorted. How do you look for the right therapist?
Shop for therapists. Like, I think as humans, we tend to hesitate to ask as many questions because we don't want to look like we don't know things. I'm all for asking questions, right? I think okay, I'll give you a personal example, right? When I was seeking a therapist back in college and I was in a new country all alone, I missed my family, I was struggling with school, I didn't know I had ADHD at that point, and I went to the therapist on campus. Absolutely hated our session. We had one session.
Whoa.
But she was just like an American white therapist who had no idea about my cultural background. So she was like, oh, you're stressed? Go on vacation. And in my head, I was like, with what money? Like, who's going to
We don't do this.
Like, I was like, no, I'm Indian. Like, how do you not understand? Like, how are you going to tell my parents this? And then she didn't understand that at all. And she was like, why don't you just take a break? And I was like, what break? How can I
it
take a
doesn't work
break?
like that. Yeah.
So she didn't give me any options. I was like, I'm never seeing you again. I
Right.
never went back to her.
And then you have a
But-
mindset that, no, this is never going to work.
yeah, fortunately I didn't. I kind of kept my mind open, and I
Nice.
was like, that's because I was studying psychology
Right.
as well, right? But
Right.
it's a hard decision to make because I know a lot of people who are like, nope, not for me, right? But then coming back from I lived in Scotland for a bit to do my master's, and when I came back, the weather over there, I slipped into depression and I couldn't get out of it. And then my parents were very supportive. We went on hikes together, and nature helped me a lot, which is how I got into outdoor hike therapy. So then I started taking clients out on hike sessions as well, because they would open up a lot more in an outdoor environment than in a clinical environment as well, right?
Right.
There's so many different types of healing, like I said before,
Right.
and I think we need to explore more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you say that, okay, you go for therapist shopping, or you go for that. So basically, what are the things that in your list should be ticked that, okay, if this is there, this is there. Like if you enjoyed the first session, or if you find a solution, is like 3 sessions good enough? 2 sessions good enough? What is the minimum time you would say that you should at least give 3 sessions with this therapist before you come to any conclusion?
I wouldn't put a timeline on it. I think it's what you feel. Like, a lot of people don't trust their gut instinct as much. If you feel a good vibe, if you feel good energy with whoever you're bonding with, not just your therapist, continue having those conversations with them, grow that relationship. But if you're not feeling it, then don't do it. Like even after that first therapist, I shopped online for some other online therapists. I went to a couple of websites, and I had 2 other therapists who, one of them didn't like at all because I didn't feel like they were responding much. They did nothing wrong. Maybe they were a good therapist, but just not for me. I wanted more of an interaction. The third therapist I tried, I was like, nope. I felt like he was just repeating everything I was saying, and it was triggering me. And I was like, nope, I don't want this. And then I eventually got a hypnotherapist, and I realized that just for anyone listening, you don't only have to bond with the therapist. Also look at the different types of therapy. There's so many different types, right?
Yeah.
So for me, talk therapy wasn't going to work. And I was like, I want to delve into hypnotherapy, which I won't get into right now, but that version of therapy helped me a lot.
Yeah.
So explore different options, research, don't self-diagnose completely, do your research and understand, and then ask questions.
Right.
I always give my clients the opportunity to ask me questions during a session as well. I'm like, we're having a back and forth conversation. I don't have the answers to everything. And I always say this, if I've said something that you don't agree with, correct me as well, because I'm also growing as a therapist. And we have healthy conversations like that.
And you've suffered from, what is it called? Compassion fatigue.
Oh, yeah. Right. You asked me earlier, how do you stay sane? And I was like, okay. And
Because
this
you're
is-
listening to so many stories, you're
Yeah.
listening to so many problems, and the expectation is that you have all the solutions.
Yeah.
But there comes a time when you might also just burn out, and you will also like
Need an outlet.
Oh,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah. So how do you actually just balance it out?
Definitely. I think there are several times, and I recognize my signs of burning out as well, right? I love getting out into nature because it's helped me a lot with my mental health. So I've now put that into like my weekly routine. I love paddle boating, so I get out into the water a lot. I dip in the sea, and it's very intentional for me. I'm big on intentions, and I say this to all my clients as well, is it doesn't matter what you're doing as long as your intention at heart is right? So when I go to nature, my intention is to cleanse myself of everything that's happened this week, and I want to like start new. I take a big deep breath, but it's things that I'm doing for myself, and it's not like it's gonna completely go away. I'm still stressed sometimes, but I am putting an effort to take care of myself.
Okay, I do understand that self-love is important, taking out time for yourself, that alone time when you're just reading or you're spending time with nature is good. But many a times, because of peer pressure,
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of weekends to yourself or that little time to yourself, right?
Right.
And this can get a little overwhelming as well. So now how do you set that boundary where you don't sound rude, but because there's the little FOMO also that what if you don't go, and then,
Right.
you know, how to...
The world
just-
changes after that.
Yeah, so how do you just kind of balance that out, that, okay,
Yeah.
that time is also important, but you're social as well, and things are balanced out.
I think I'm going to use the word self-compassion, right? Where we have compassion for ourselves to be able to set boundaries for ourselves and for other people around you. Now, with self-love, that doesn't involve only like putting on face masks and like going to get a manicure, pedicure, like chilling on your own. You can also set boundaries, and that's a form of self-love, self-compassion, where I could say, hey, you know what, I want to go to this gathering, this party, but I'm exhausted. I know that I have very low energy right now, and I need to just stay at home, stare at a wall, do nothing, right? There's so many different versions of it. Like I have 2 rescue cats, and sometimes I just like do what they're doing. Like we'll nap in the afternoon, I'll just stare out of the window and look at the birds, but we don't take the time to just be present in the moment, right? We're constantly like on the go, like constantly.
Yeah.
And so I think that with taking a break, with like taking time for yourself, it doesn't always involve you being alone. It could also be like sometimes my friend and I just sit and do nothing. We'll sit
Yeah.
and doom scroll in
Yeah.
silence, and that's also very relaxing for me,
Yeah,
right?
true.
You gotta pick and choose what you need for
Yeah.
yourself, right?
Prioritize.
Yeah, prioritize yourself. And there are times when that priority might change. Maybe I care a lot about this person, or my friend is in an emergency, so then I will change my priority. But hey, I am making that choice, right? No one else is making it for me. And I think that takes a lot of effort, a lot of self-analysis, not overthinking, but I'm actually analyzing it to say, I want to do this, or I don't want to do this, right?
How do you say I need space in a polite way? Because unfortunately that is always taken wrong, whether you're
Yeah.
telling your parents or you're telling your friend or whoever, you know, when you say that, hey, I need space, they're like, why? What did I do? Nothing. You just
Yeah.
need space.
Yeah.
How do you say it nicely?
Okay, I wanna add that like with communication, we always mostly focus on verbal communication.
Right.
There's a lot of ways to communicate, right? Sometimes people might struggle to say that verbally to someone.
Right.
Maybe texting them or letting them know, like, you know, in a message might be better. Or you know, people can read your body language as well. They can tell you need a break, things like that. But you know, without going too much into detail with that, I want to say that with setting boundaries, for anyone who doesn't understand what a boundary is, it's like stating what you need or what you don't need, right?
Right.
With a boundary, now when you express boundaries, the more you start expressing boundaries, when you prioritize your own needs, you will start losing relationships, right? For people who do not respect your boundaries, will look at you and be like, wait, you're different. You're now not giving me everything you need. So they would start treating you differently.
Yeah.
And that's great. It's great because then you now realize who you want to maintain healthy connections with and who
Right.
are not healthy for you, right?
Right.
So imagine someone who is a people pleaser, right? If you're constantly saying yes to your friend all the time and you're always there for them and they're not really reciprocating that relationship, then when you start setting a boundary and your friend is not hanging out with you as often, who's benefiting from that? You, right? You're benefiting from that because now you're not giving them your all. You're actually learning to prioritize yourself. So if you lose that friendship, it's grief, yes, it's sad that you've lost that relationship, but different emotions can exist at the same time. So you can be sad that you lost that relationship, but you can also be like happy that you're now prioritizing yourself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us, like, earlier when I said emotions are not the problem, your reaction is. You can react, you can cry because you've lost that relationship, but you can also celebrate that you're now not a people pleaser anymore.
Yeah. Does that happen because how have you been brought up, and as kids, how many times, or have you been really taught how to say no or to really express your feelings? Because what happens is that you just cannot say no to your parents. Like whatever they ask you to do, you're just supposed to say yes.
Yeah.
Because there are two ways of looking at it. A, because the parents feel a little offended maybe, or if the child says that no, I'm not just kind of okay with it.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you just kind of balance that out?
Yeah.
Because I remember having a very interesting conversation with Rumeta, and she happened to mention that she teaches and she kind of does these negotiation skills where they teach you the art of saying no, which is very simple, but it's easier.
We all struggle.
Yeah. So how do you do that with kids where the parents also should be open to listen to a no, and it's not even coming as a rude one?
Yeah.
So how do you instill that practice technically?
I mean, I'm sure like for us growing up as well, we've heard our parents say no a lot, right?
Yeah.
Without giving
But as kids, you can't say that.
without giving you a reason as to why they're saying no, which is why I always tell parents, explain your no so your kid understands where this reasoning is coming from, right? Same for kids as well. When you're saying no, when you're stating a boundary for yourself, then express why. And you don't owe anyone any explanations. If you care about your relationship with a person, then I would say, like, let's say I care about my relationship with this friend, and so if I was going to say no, I can't show up to your dinner party, then I'll say, hey, I'm actually super exhausted, there's a reasoning there,
Right.
and I want to come, there's intention there,
Right.
but I cannot come right now. And so that's the action that I'm going to do, is I'm going to stay at home.
Wow.
Right.
And that's important. So I would say like a 3-way step of saying, your emotion, your intention, and then the action plan after that.
Right.
Like I said before, intention is so important,
Right.
because if I were to just straight up say, nah, I'm not coming, that's
Yeah.
rude, right?
Yeah.
Even to parents, I can say, hey, I really want to, but I
Yeah.
cannot right now. And if the other person understands it, that's a healthy relationship. If they
Yeah.
get mad at you for it, then not my problem. At that point, I'm just like, okay,
Yeah.
this is not good. You're not reacting in a good way. I wouldn't say not my problem, but
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to dip into that, because it's not my responsibility to explain why you need to hold space for me.
Yeah. How do you also instill the habit or the emotion of independence? Because what tends to happen, especially in these days, every kid has a caretaker, every kid
Right.
has like everything before they even ask for is ready for them.
Yeah.
Right. In this, what happens is that you tend to lose that thing of making those decisions. Like you don't really make a
Yeah.
lot of decisions, which eventually affects you.
Right.
So how can you actually balance that out as well?
Honestly, in our culture, we're spoon-fed all the time, right? Since we were kids, where everything was done for us. Like when I went to uni, I didn't know how to do laundry. I didn't know how to cook. Like I had to Google this stuff. And
No way.
I'm not joking. I was
No
watching.
way.
I was watching
You were
YouTube. I was watching. Well, I had that privilege, and I'm aware
Yeah.
of it, right? But
Yeah.
I was literally watching YouTube videos on how to do my laundry, because I didn't know how to use a laundromat machine or any
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
I was
Because everything was taken care of.
everything
right?
was taken care of, and then I
Yeah.
realized, I was like, I wish I knew what to do, because I'm learning this in adulthood, and while I'm struggling with college and this and that.
Yeah.
It was a lot, I think a lot of parents need to realize that, yeah, you can support your kids as well, but then where do you draw the line? Like, give your kids certain things to do where they learn how to take care of themselves. It could be like really basic things, like, wash your own plate after you finish. Don't depend on somebody else to do it. Put your laundry in the basket, do certain things like that, where you're not having everything picked up after you. So I think that would promote some independence in children as well. I also always encourage clients to adopt animals, because that's another way of promoting independence.
Responsibility, teach
You're
them
taking care of
responsibility.
another life as well, right?
Right.
I don't suggest this all the time, because some kids will just, it's another life. You don't want
Right.
to trial and test this method, but I think these are like good options to start promoting independence in kids.
Another
Right.
thing is the conversation about finances. How important do you think it is important to be open and transparent and communicate how finances work in the real world?
Yeah, because you know what? When you actually go to a store, there are two kinds of kids. One kid is going to be like, I want to shop everything. I want this.
Right.
And there's going to be another kid who knows exactly what the budget is like and what he really wants to pick. Okay?
Yeah.
But then there's a part 3 also. If somebody questions them, why aren't you picking up something more? So they clearly say, yeah, because I think they'll even say that probably because dad is poor, whatever. That's
Whoa.
the budget. Yeah, they say it very openly because that's how it's in their head. Even if the
Right.
dad doesn't want you to.
Maybe he was just joking
probably,
around.
Yeah, probably
Yeah.
he just wants that discipline to be there.
Right.
But the kids take it very differently. So how you actually, like how she asked, how you really instill that importance of
Yeah.
finance and not taking everything
And make
for
sure they don't
granted.
embarrass you in public.
Yeah, right.
Right. I don't think parents need to like go into such details with their children if they don't want to. Like as adult parents, you share as much as you want to. Like when I say talk about your emotions and share with your children, there is a fine line as to how much you want to share. You don't want to go into personal trauma and dump that on your
No.
child, right?
Yeah.
So you can say, oh, I'm having a bad day, but I don't really want to get into it. I'm going to take care of myself by watching TV or something like that. But if you're having, like, parents are having financial issues, then you don't need to go into details as to why and how. Just tell your child that you're struggling a bit and they need to, like, help out. As humans, our tendency to want to help is very, very common. It's like in our values, right? And so if you were to, like, let's say a parent would have just asked their child and say, hey, this month not doing too great, you know, how about we work on this together? Let's not shop as much. Let's only get one thing from the store. Imagine having that conversation with your kid, right? Now, if you've already built a strong, healthy relationship with your child and your child understands that, they're not going to fight with you in the store. Or they're
But
gonna,
what if they don't actually have a financial problem but still want that discipline to be there in the kid?
Well, I don't know. I feel like a lot of parents sometimes I've noticed give their children money when they're like they reward them like with positive reinforcement when they do something good. That's
Yeah.
also not a very good idea
Because that's
what-
like a trait then.
right, like you're gonna grow up to do nice things for people expecting something nice
Yeah.
in return when
Yeah.
the world doesn't work that way, right? So I feel like that's tricky. There's a lot of other variables involved where I think parents should have better conversations with their kids if there is financial difficulty or if they want their child to, you know, set a
Okay,
limit.
I'll
to how
frame
much
it
they
another
buy.
way.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you actually instill the feeling or instill gratitude when the kids have so much of access to easy luxury?
I think having a conversation about privilege and understanding how the world works. There's a lot happening in the world right now, and
At what age can you have that conversation?
honestly, I've had young clients as young as like 2 years, 3 years, and I've had a kid who was about 5 or 6 have conversations with me about racism and colorism. And why? Because her mom was very self-aware, and they used to have these conversations. Maybe not at the level that adults would have it, but a very basic childlike level of saying, hey, you know, you live in this area and you have all these privileges, but there are also people out there who don't have these privileges. And, you know, what can you do to be a better person in this world? And that kid turned out to be great because,
Nice.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
you know, as young
Because
as
those are the
5 and
things
she
that-
was analyzing it. Now imagine she goes into adulthood understanding that, okay, I have this privilege. What can I do to help other people who don't have this privilege? And she's having healthy conversations with other people around her as well. And I think that's great parenting right there.
What advice would you give to parents who are going through a sibling rivalry? Like they see in the house where they feel that one kid is feeling more important than the other. See, there are two
Yeah.
ways where you say that, okay, there's only one child, the most pampered, all the attention, and that's a different story. But
Yeah.
when there are kids, like there are 3 or 4 in the house, it's actually very difficult to give the same kind of attention or the same kind of response to everyone.
Do
Yeah.
you
So how do you
agree-
be fair to everybody?
Do you
Yeah.
agree that parents, like in connection to this, parents actually have like a favorite child?
I don't like, okay.
I'd like to believe that I am the one out of the 4 that we are. Yeah.
I think favoritism is not common. I think like, okay, like let's say between me and my sister, like I know that we both bond with our parents on different things, right? It's not like they have a favorite child, but we'll have different conversations about different things, and we will connect on different things.
But that's
right?
now, given your age.
Right.
Let's assume that
When
we are
you're
talking
younger,
about, yeah.
I find that a lot of times kids with other siblings will come up to me in sessions and say, I know my mom and my dad love my brother more than me.
Yeah.
You know, and that's hard. I would then ask them, how are you making that judgment? Why are you making that judgment? You know? And they would say, oh, because they're always paying attention to them. Like, oh, they get ice cream and I don't. And I'm like, okay, how do you communicate a need? Like, you have a need for attention. How do you ask for it? If you want more time with your parents, how do you communicate that? And then with parent counseling, I would also talk to the parent and ask them, you know, how can you as a parent make time for each child? Now, you don't have to go ahead and do like something really big. It could be something really minimal, like, hey, let's cook something together today. And that's more of a connection than, you know, taking your kid out to like Disneyland or whatever it is, you know. You don't have to go all the way to put in so much effort. It's the tiny things that matter, and intention, once again, letting your child know, hey, this is one-on-one time just for you, and I'm doing this with you, and then maybe tomorrow will be with the next child. So
yeah.
it's
But
hard.
It's such a sorry, listen.
Yeah, I mean, I do understand that, you know, like to be fair to all the kids at the same time, because again, when you say let's cook something together, the next conversation is going to be, because she wanted to have a pizza, that's why we're making pizza for everybody.
Yeah. Oh, it could be because like you then understand your children, right?
Yeah.
Each child has a different personality, and if your one child really enjoys cooking, then that's what you would do
Yeah.
with them.
Okay, now I have another question, following question, which comes from our cameraman who's sitting right there behind the camera. And while I was having a conversation with him about the questions that we're going to ask, he brought this up and he said that these days it's very common where you have both the parents working. Okay, and then the child is taken care of by the caretaker, or you have a babysitter, or you have somebody like an uncle, aunt, someone to
Yeah.
take care of the child. The next thing you see is that after 3-4 months, when the child is spending so much time with this caretaker or the babysitter, the minute you come back home, the first thing that you see is that the child actually runs to the caretaker or to the babysitter first.
Yeah.
Guilt comes in, a lot of doubts and questions come in,
Yeah.
and then you question yourself whether it's really worth it or not.
Yeah.
How do you balance that out?
That's tough. Great question. It's so difficult because, like, you know, we live in a capitalistic world and there are needs. Parents have to go to work sometimes to earn money to take care of their family. And I think that at the end of the day, even if your child may run to the nanny more often than not, you can still build a healthy connection with your child. If your child has the understanding that, oh, you're going to work to earn money, it's not because you don't want to spend time with me. And maybe the weekends, you could do even like a 30-minute activity together, and that's your way of building that relationship with your child. But I feel like the child also needs to understand this about the parent and the parent's needs to take care of the family. Once again, open conversations are necessary,
again.
right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that conversation, then it's all going to be just unsaid, and you don't know why your parents are not paying you attention,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
maybe a child would perceive that as, oh, I'm not loved, let me seek that from somebody else. Or they would grow up to then feel very unloved when maybe the parents were showing love in a very different way, which was taking care of them, providing for them. And that's also another version of love.
So communication is key. The more you talk, the
Yes.
more you share.
I
I
always
think
say
the better
that.
it is. Talking about attention-seeking kids, talking about hyperactive kids, talking about ADHD now.
Okay.
Now you specialize in that, and you actually
mentioned that you
Yeah, you were yourself.
Yes.
But what are the symptoms, and at what age can you really figure that out? That okay, this child is going through that.
Okay, from a psychologist perspective, I'm going to say that before previously, ADHD was diagnosed as, like, I think people would see children who are hyperactive physically and say, okay, that's definitely ADHD. But
that was a
That's
common
a lot of people actually
misconception.
think
Yes.
like that.
right,
Yeah.
but I want to
Like jokingly
open
also
this up-
they'll say.
Yeah, open this up just a bit more to say that hyperactivity can be in thoughts as well, right? We can have hyperactive thoughts where you're unable to concentrate on just one thing. Now
Right.
with ADHD, this is my most fun trait, is that you can do two different like spectrums of it. One is you can't focus on anything because your mind's jumping from one thing to another.
Right.
And on the other hand, you can do like 20 tasks at the same time. I can do my laundry and then go clean this and then like you do so many things at the same time,
Yeah.
but you're still jumping from one task to another, right?
Yeah.
It depends on your mental energy level as well.
I'd like to say that's a Gemini trait as well. Where you are multitasking.
Call
on
outside.
it.
Are you a Gemini?
I am. Okay.
All right. Well, I think that kids as young as like 4 to 5 can get diagnosed, can get screened for ADHD with early intervention. That is learning with coming to a therapist, learning methods on how to manage your ADHD traits. For those of you who don't know, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And I had a little kid client actually say, it's not a disorder, it's a delight. I love that. I was like,
So sweet.
right? I
That's
told
a
her that I
first.
was going to tell everyone that I
Yeah.
learned it from her. But it's the best thing because it is
Yeah.
a delight, right? As an adult, actually, a lot of women in their 30s get diagnosed with ADHD.
I was just gonna ask
Right?
that
Because mostly
oh.
women don't get diagnosed, especially when they're younger, because it's people would say that it's probably due to hormonal issues, your
Everything is just
menstrual
always
cycle,
hormonal.
right? And there's a lot of other factors that they would blame it on, but they wouldn't really look at ADHD as an option as well. So you'll notice that a lot of women in their 30s are now understanding, oh, I've had this all along, which is super interesting. When I have kids who are diagnosed, who come to me for, talk therapy, play therapy, their parents will have these conversations with me and be like, oh, wait, I think I have it too. And then they would go get diagnosed. And
Oh.
it's so interesting to see how then...
But what are the initial signs or the symptoms that you feel?
Yeah, let's
apart
do
from,
this right now. Let's
yeah,
just
apart
shoot
from that, you
okay.
say that your mind is jumping and you're not able to concentrate, you're not
Yeah.
able to focus. Maybe a parent now watching this would be like, oh my god, he cannot do his homework and cannot concentrate on the studies because his mind is always thinking about the games to be played on the phone.
Right.
But that's not ADHD, right?
Right,
Because that's
it's
not that's not just the
There are
focus
so
thing.
many different traits. So there are screenings that you can do online as well. I always say that I don't diagnose anymore.
Okay.
I will have a client come to me with a diagnosis or without a diagnosis, and then we'll still do sessions like that.
Okay.
But you're right. It's not just like, oh, I can't concentrate on this, so
Yeah.
class, I have ADHD.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other traits like I would look into traits of like not being able to sit in one spot, maybe issues with sleep, issues with your nutrition. ADHD affects so many different aspects of your life. It's not just not being able to focus on one thing.
This is also
alone.
for adults.
Yeah, for adults and kids as well.
Oh, I'm reflecting now.
Yeah.
So what would you advise to parents and teachers who are actually dealing with or who have kids
To
who
make
are going
special
to-
provisions for them to, how I said in schools, you're constantly made to fit into this box.
Right.
You're not a robot in
Yeah.
school, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't agree with how the school systems work anywhere in the world where they train you to be someone who listens, right? Like you listen to authority, right? Which my theory is that that's how they're training you for adult life, right? But I won't get into that. I think that with kids who don't fit into that box, who are neurodivergent, how do you as a teacher or as a parent help your kid go through life with the traits that they have? Right? For example, with my ADHD, I am very bad with time. I will tend to procrastinate a lot sometimes.
Oh.
And I think my brain will just work better if I have an assignment due, like back in college. I want to do it last minute because that's where my creative
totally
energy
feel
comes
you.
from, right?
Totally feel
I
you.
can't do it like 1 week in advance. My brain's just not working. I now understand that. So now if I were to prepare for an assignment, I would say, okay, I'm going to do it 1 day before because then I'm getting the best of both worlds where it is almost
That's where you're
last
the
minute.
most.
But yeah, it's a choice that I'm making for myself. So I think being a lot more aware of your traits and then, go get a screening.
That's
go
much of the added pressure with such
Yeah.
a short timeline
Go,
every
like,
time. You're
talk
putting
to-
a timer on for yourself, right?
Yeah.
But that
But
is
that
something
works
that
for
works for you.
certain
Yeah,
people,
so
yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm not looking at it as a disorder. I'm not looking at it
Yeah.
as a flaw. I'm looking at it as, I know this is how I work. How can I use this to my benefit at
Right.
this point? And if
Right.
I can't, then what are the consequences and how do I deal with that going
Right.
forward? So whenever I see ADHD clients, I love all my ADHD clients' conversations because we go through this journey of, like I said before, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to guide you, right?
Right,
So we'll
right.
discuss traits and I'm like, all right, okay, you procrastinate, but how does that help you? Like
Yeah.
if you're doing it better at a faster rate and you're more creative if you do it last minute, can you do it in a way that it's not hurting you as well? And we'll do trial and error methods of like what works for you and what doesn't as well. But I like that it's constantly changing and evolving and growing
Yeah.
as you grow up.
Do you
right?
also agree with that whatever you eat also affects your behavior?
Definitely. Like imagine there's like documentaries on this, right?
Yeah.
Of like people eating so much junk food, so much
Yeah.
processed food.
Yeah.
I definitely think what you put into your body affects your behavior.
Right.
Because imagine you're constantly on like sugared up sodas and junk food.
Yeah.
How are you going to feel after that? Your body's not reacting very well to it. You're going to feel lethargic, which would then play out into your behavior as well. And it's nutrition for your brain, right? It's food for your brain. So if you want to behave and analyze things in a better way, then put healthy food into your body. I obviously have like an unhealthy meal every now and then, but it's the thoughts that come with it as well, right?
Right.
I'm not going to only have unhealthy meals. I'm like,
Once in a
nope,
while.
I'm doing it because I deserve it. And I
Yeah.
hate using the word cheat meal because I'm like, it's not a cheat meal. I'm not cheating on anything.
Conscious
It's a
decision.
reward.
I
Yeah,
choose
it's a
to eat this.
self-compassion meal.
Yeah, it's a
right?
reward.
This
Yeah,
way,
fair enough.
right?
Okay.
But yeah, I think it depends on how you speak to yourself as well with the food that you put into your body. So, okay, in a metaphoric way, like it's not just food you put into your body, but it's also conversations and energies that you take in with people you interact with, right? It's whatever you're putting into you, right? Into your heart and your soul, and that would reflect differently with how you behave.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
sorry. I was just going to come on to being a people pleaser. Like,
Yeah.
right from our childhood, we are taught that, okay, this uncle and auntie is going to come over. So, why don't you perform? You're good at this. Why
God.
don't you just do that? Which technically we understand that
Yeah.
shouldn't be the right approach. You shouldn't just ask them to perform or sing or dance or do
Yeah.
whatever. Okay. But then your brain is conditioned in such a way that children tend to often become a people pleaser just because they want that, that how do I say that title that this kid is very nice,
Right.
when they get compared with the other
The
kids.
validation
Yeah,
that they get,
true that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your question?
So my
Like-
question being that it actually happens at a very young age when children get into that trap, right? So where is
Right.
that? How can you draw?
Priorities once again, like I think if parents understand that your child is not your little zoo monkey, right? Your child, just because it's your child doesn't mean your child is not an individual with their own traits as well. A lot of times parents, I think when you birth a child, you think, okay, that's definitely like my property, and
I own
whatever
it.
I say goes. We need to start treating children as separate individuals with their own brain power to make their own decisions. You as a parent can guide them for sure, but ask them for their opinions, make them feel like they're heard as well.
Yeah.
Literally all the kid clients I see, sometimes they open up and tell me so much because someone's listening to them. Someone's asking them for their opinion and asking them what their thoughts are on things. And I think that's important to make you feel seen, right?
Yeah.
We all want to be seen.
Yeah.
And a lot of times parents, I think, expect their kids to please other people because it's on them. Like, why are parents people pleasers? What are you trying to show the world? Why do you care so much about what others think
Yeah.
instead of would you rather pay more attention to what others think than what your child
Child think.
needs?
Yeah.
You gotta come on, balance that
Yeah.
out. Like
Yeah,
if you
I
ask
know
a
what you
parent that question, then they recognize that, oh, my child is actually very uncomfortable to do this, and you would then choose your child's needs
Yeah.
over trying to please some other
Somebody
uncle or
else.
auntie.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you need to have
Self-awareness.
these conversations with your kids, and I think parents need to be self-aware and realize that,
Right.
oh, it's not on my child,
It's
it's
on
on me. I'm the one trying to make my child perform to
Right.
someone else, like in front of someone else, when that's not necessary. That would also dip into consent, which is something I talk to parents a lot about. Is abuse is really common, and I think there's so many different forms of abuse. But if your child does not want to hug or kiss someone, an adult, then don't force them to do so, because what may seem comfortable to you might not be comfortable to the next person. Maybe your child does not want to go hug someone in their family. Maybe sit down and ask your child what's making them uncomfortable. What can you do to help support your child, rather than forcing them to do something that somebody else wants? Because like you said, that would then turn into adulthood, them in their adulthood wanting to do everything for everyone else, and you don't prioritize
That's
your needs at
yourself.
all.
Yeah.
If you're constantly going to say what would others think,
Yeah,
then
then you just keep
who's gonna
thinking
ask
about
you about
other-
yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about that, what you eat obviously affects your behavior, but then there's also a part where, considering that we are in this digital age, so much of access to social media, how can parents actually help their kids to have a positive body image where they don't compare themselves so often with what they see. Like, today if you see the kids, there's a certain standard. This should be the ideal weight. This is how your hair should look like. The ones who've got curly hair wants to achieve straight hair. The ones who've got straight hair want to have curly hair.
Yeah.
They have makeup. They have access to all the best of makeup. They want the branded bags. My question being here, coming from social media, where they tend to compare themselves so often with the other and the outside world, how can parents really help them to be sane?
Yes. I'm just thinking about like me as a 12-year-old. Like I looked horrible. Like who dressed?
We all had that
Yeah,
age,
I was like,
okay?
who
Yeah,
dressed
yeah.
me
Even
back
I was
then?
not happy with my short hair, but my mom was like, "No, I'm not going to make ponies for you in the morning."
Too much effort, Karim. I'm not investing that much in him.
But like look at the 12-year-olds now. I'm like, how you guys look so fashionable and
Yeah,
like grown.
right?
Have you seen those memes of like what I look like a 12-year-old and what
Yeah,
12-year-olds
yeah,
look
yeah,
like
yes,
now?
yes.
Yeah, but you know what? I think representation matters. With what you're putting into your brain as well, what you're taking in visually, you need to understand that there is diversity, right? There is a European beauty standard that a lot of people aspire to be, because that's like what the older generation used to only like what we used to be exposed to in social media, movies, posters, whatever it is, right? We don't realize subconsciously that we're taking in so much as we go along. Like, let's say the three of us, we go grocery shopping, right? Anywhere from like movie posters to signs, or music, or any of the things that we're constantly like taking in, like unconsciously taking in, is affecting us. But what do you do after that, right? So I personally feel like with my journey of self-love and like my body image issues, I've understood that, and then now cleaned up my social media, cleaned up like what I'm exposed to as well. I will now watch movies with people who look like me, maybe different colored people, different shapes of people. Not just movies, with like music, social media, people I follow. If you need to diversify your content, the content that you're taking in as well, because if there isn't any diversity, then what are you comparing yourself to, right? Someone who does not look like you at all, something that you're never going to achieve. Like, let's talk about colorism. We're in a culture where like a lot of us are brown skin or darker skin. Like I know of people who are so fixated on wanting to be fairer skinned, but you're never going to achieve that with a face cream, right?
Right.
And that's something that we need to understand, is like it's so much deeper than just a face cream. Like, why is it that you hate what you look like? Who has made you feel like that? What have you exposed yourself to understand that you are not beautiful, but that one standard of beauty is so much better than you, right? So like, let's say when I cleaned up my social media, I started following men and women who looked more similar to me, who were from similar cultures, where I started like actually diversifying that content. And now I don't feel like, every now and then I would feel insecure, but I'm understanding where that insecurity would come from. And then I'm like, okay, it's coming from an older version of me that's wanting to be a certain way, but I now understand that I need to be inclusive of what I'm putting into my mind as well.
Right.
I think that's really important. So
Self-acceptance, self-love,
Yeah,
self-awareness,
self-compassion.
yeah,
No, I think
self-compassion.
three of us sitting at this table,
Yeah.
but none of us are, honestly, we're not parents. But we do have friends who have kids. And
And we have siblings who have kids.
and siblings who have kids.
Right.
The only child, sorry about that.
Okay.
So sometimes it's very obvious what this friend is doing to their child is not okay.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
either they smother them with love, or the child's 12, they still treat them like they're 5. How do you communicate to these friends? Because they're also our friends, but they're also a parent.
Yeah, that's
And then you're also going to be judged because you don't have.
Yeah. They're like, how would you
They're
know?
like,
I'm like,
how would you know it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer
Yeah,
that.
where is that experience coming from?
I've
Hi,
literally
I
had
feel-
a parent say, "Do you have kids?" And I was like, "No."
So there you go.
And then
And
they'll
they're
be
like,
how
there
would
you
you
go.
"How are you
know?
giving advice?" And I was like, "Because I was trained.
That's literally my job.
This is my job." But yeah, I've seen like there are therapist kids who they won't therapize their own kids because they're like, it's different. There's a line you separate, right? I would say to you is like, why are you feeling responsible to tell this your friend?
Because it's annoying.
Right?
It's like,
so
how
like,
And maybe because she likes the friend and she wants good for the child.
and that also
Exactly.
lets paint a better light.
yeah. So then how would you communicate that, right? If you're going to be like, yo, you're doing this wrong, then you're pointing fingers. People get defensive. You're not going to want to go at that conversation, go into that conversation saying, hey, you're doing this is wrong. Maybe asking a question might be more beneficial. Like, hey, do you think, maybe this is actually doing this to the child? And like, you have a healthy conversation like that rather than pointing fingers at someone. It also
Nice way
really
to go about
depends
it.
on your relationship with the
True
person,
that,
right?
yes.
We gotta figure out how much responsibility we want to take to educate somebody else and how much of it is not your problem at all. Like I always
I'm gonna
say.
go home and just chill
Yeah.
with my dogs.
There are times I'm like itching to say something to someone because like the therapist in me is like,
Yeah.
correct them, but I'm also like, nope, not my problem.
Yeah.
Like, why would I give you my time and energy when I clearly know that you're not gonna make a difference? You're not gonna change that behavior. That's on you. And I will then set a boundary with how I interact with you because I know you're not gonna change that behavior, right? So if you feel comfortable, have that conversation, but not in a way where you're pointing fingers. And if you don't feel comfortable, then how do you set a boundary for yourself so that you're not annoyed as well?
But does it happen with you very often where people are like that, oh, you met this new person, so what do you think about this person?
Oh gosh, all the time. all the time.
Get into the head, right? What do they
Yeah, I
say?
think I'm
How
going
are
to
they?
ask her, so after the conversation, so what do you think?
Yeah.
What did you
yeah.
notice?
I think we were talking about this earlier. I think people judge all the time, and I don't think judgment's bad because that's how you protect yourself, right?
Yeah.
You have your gut instinct to tell you whether someone's good for you or someone's not good for
Right.
you, right?
So being judgy is absolutely okay.
Well, I don't like being judgy all the time, but like, let's say I'll call it an analyzing thing. Right? So I'm
It just
analyzing.
makes it different and it sounds
like it.
nicer.
Yeah, I like
potato,
the term.
potato.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you're literally, I'm analyzing.
Analyzing, not
because
judging.
we would pick up on like body language,
Right.
energy,
Right.
communication skills, and then you can say, oh, I don't really like this person. So we're already, judging a person, especially based on physical appearance as well,
right,
which also
right,
says a lot.
right,
And I know
right.
people say don't judge someone based on their physical appearance, but to be honest, like if I saw someone who was super flashy and always in branded clothes and was like not very nice person, I know that that person's ego is really high and I don't want to bond with that person. I'm obviously judging that person, but in a good way where I'm protecting
Right.
myself,
Yourself,
right?
yeah. Right.
So it's how I
To
perceive
certain-
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. So I wouldn't say I'm being judgy. I'm analyzing
Analyzing.
whether this person's good for me or not, right? But what was your question?
I just love the
Completely
answer.
We got what we wanted.
No, I
I
just wanted to know that do people actually
Yeah.
ask you to just kind of analyze a person
all the
if you met?
time, and I'm like, this is my job. I love having
you're technically
conversations
working
like
all the
this,
time.
but I'm like, I'm not gonna do this for free if I'm gonna get into like
Yeah.
analysis of like, I'm like, come have a session with me and we'll have
Yeah.
these conversations. But with my friends, with you guys, like I love having these conversations because it helps me grow as a person as well. I
Yeah.
love hearing your perspectives on it
Yeah.
as well. But if someone were to like, oh, analyze me, and I'm like, no, that's my job. Like, don't ask me to do it for free because I'm good at it.
I don't know how easy is it going to be for you when you get into a relationship or when you
Yeah.
have a person and when you're
let's not
noticing
get started.
when you're noticing everything right from the
They
beginning.
can see right
yeah?
through you.
Yeah.
Know what you're doing.
I will say this, okay, through personal experiences with relationships that I've had as well, it's not like because I'm a therapist, just like how we said earlier, even though you're a therapist, you can't have like the perfect child with that perfect
Yeah.
relationship. It's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
My professional professional side is different from my personal side as well, right? So it's different hats that I put on, different
Right.
masks that I put on.
Right.
I would be a therapist when I'm in the clinic. Then out of the clinic, I'm a friend, I'm a cat mom, I'm a rescuer. I'm different things to different people.
Yeah.
And that's also okay. But I also know that I have a safe space where I can completely be myself, take all those masks off and just be on my own. For me,
Yeah.
that's when I'm paddle boating. When
Yeah.
I'm in the sea, that's for me. But I think that with people expecting me to analyze them all the time, getting into relationships as well, getting into new friendships, I still make mistakes because I'm still
Yeah,
a
indeed.
human. I still don't have the answers to everything. Like I said, I've had relationships that were not very healthy for me, where I've gone through it, and then people have always said, why don't you get out of this? Because you're a therapist, you should have known this. And I'm like, no.
You're a human at the
'Cause,
end of
yeah,
it.
at the end
Yeah.
of the day, this is my personal life, and it's hard to
Yeah.
make those choices for myself because
Yeah.
I come with my own baggage as well.
Right.
That's not something I would take into my professional setting with a client.
Yeah.
That's
So-
separate.
So no one's perfect. Is
Yeah, of
what
course.
self-love, self-awareness,
Yes.
self-compassion. Yeah,
So
all of
tell me
that.
one thing. So you mentioned that you separate professional from personal. Now, say you're in a group, you're with your closest buddies, and your friend is messing it up big time.
Yeah.
What role do you assume?
Once again, I've had these conversations like with my best friends as well, and I'll say, okay, a bit of a therapist point of view here, but this is it. But then I'll also give it like real talk. Like I said, I'm not going to tell my clients in my professional setting, I'm not going to tell them what to do, right? But with a best friend, I could straight up call her out on it and say, hey, I see this happening, because that's my relationship with my best friend. I'm able to say it what it is, right? Because I know she's not going to like stop talking to me. I know
Right.
she's going to respond and say that hurt my feelings. I'm going to have a real conversation there. So I'm able to separate those two things in a really good way.
So it actually depends a lot on you as well as to
Correct.
how available or how accessible are you to the other people
Right.
Yes.
out there. Or
So
yeah.
there's another thing that I always want to ask is that there's certain people who are open to therapy. Like
Right.
not only say we'd be open to therapy if somebody said that, oh hey, we want to go for therapy, we're not going to judge or analyze, we'd be like, hey, that's a good call. But then there's a certain segment of people who think that going to therapy is like a strict no-no. Like I can
Right.
sort my things out myself, I don't need to go for therapy.
Yeah.
This therapy makes me less of who I am, whatever.
Right.
How do you actually change that perspective? How do you get a person who's like, no, I don't want therapy, to being more open to therapy?
There's this meme or a poster that's been doing rounds where they say that I am going for therapy because the people around me choose not to.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So yeah, so I mean, like, to
Yeah.
answer her question, yeah, please go for it.
I say this to all my clients, is that like talk therapy is not the only way. There's so many forms of healing. Like for me, I did my therapy sessions, but when I'm not seeing my therapist, I have other options to dip into, right? Like I'll go paddleboarding, I'll rescue animals, I'll get some good food, whatever it is. Like it changes, right? But if someone doesn't want to, or like someone says, oh, I can figure this out on my own,
And
then
you really know they
Well,
cannot.
go ahead, try it on your own. If you can't, then go seek therapy. I also always say that you don't have to go seek therapy just when you're having an issue, right? I have clients who don't have any issues, like big issues like that in life. They will come in and be like, I just want to like have a conversation like this, or I just want to figure out what life is. I just want to vent to someone, and that's also okay. There's no big problems there. It's just like I just need someone to like go back and forth and bounce thoughts off of. Great, that's also what you can use therapy for, right? So don't like wait until a problem to seek therapy. Sometimes if you need direction, that's a good idea for therapy. If therapy is not working for you, then go find other ways to figure it out, right? I know of people who don't seek therapy. They don't talk bad about therapy either because they know other people who it's helpful for. But maybe they might go out into nature, and their own self-analysis will help them find direction in life. And that's another option as well, right? As long as we're not like dissing people for the options that they choose to heal, to work on their self-healing journey. I think that's key.
There's another side to it. It's very easy to fall in love with your therapist.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, like people tend to fall in love with the therapist,
they're-
but they know where to draw the line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they're
And-
listening to them. They're
yeah.
solving their problems.
Right.
Yeah.
What else do you want from a
Yeah,
person, right?
yeah. I don't know if you watched the movie Dear Zindagi. Shah Rukh Khan, Alia Bhatt.
No, I haven't.
I have watched that.
The
yeah.
minute that thing comes where she's falling in for SRK
Yeah.
is like technically where they end the movie. It's
I
like,
don't
no,
blame her.
oh, well, yeah, everybody wants to have a therapist like him, right?
Right. But yeah, okay, so
How do you draw that line?
I have amazing clients who all respect my boundaries, and that's something that I'm very open about. Like aside from seeing clients one-to-one as well, I also have like my WhatsApp business for any emergencies, for any clients who are self-harming. I also have my email in case that's something that they want to like just word vomit information as well. But they also understand this is a boundary I set with them is you have these options, but I might not be completely accessible all the time. right? Because I have my own personal life.
Right.
And it's amazing to see how, like, on their
They
own
respect it.
self-healing journey, they respect my boundaries too. And they're like, oh, we knew you were on vacation, so we didn't want to send you that. We waited until after.
Yeah.
And I was like, I love that. I love that we're able to have that healthy communication between us, a great, healthy client-therapist relationship. But for people who would, like, I would say, if you feel like you're falling in love with your therapist, then please get a new therapist. Please call yourself out on this, because we can't fully depend on one person, right? Like, I say this even to couples, like, if you're in a relationship, don't be fully dependent on the other person. That's not helping you at all, right? And also don't be hyper independent as well. Know when to reach out for resources and when you can kind of figure it out
The
on your own.
balance, striking
Yeah.
that balance.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when people say balance, they expect it to be like a 50-50,
Yeah.
but it isn't. It could be like a 70-30 or maybe a 20-80.
I want to be more giving. The other one needs that attention.
It
So,
shifts, it changes
yeah.
all
And
the time.
you just balance it out and it's nice and happy and healthy.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about back to school. We have kids going back to school after a good break of 2 months, 3 months. There's going to be little anxiety, there's going to be a lot of fun, and there's going to be excitement to share all the adventures and the stories that they did during their summer break, right?
Yes.
Now, what happens also here is that when you share stories about your summer break, you often tend to add things just to sound very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you want to be the kid with the coolest story.
Yeah,
you had the
that
best
I went
holiday.
to the coolest place. I did the coolest things. I had the best adventures, and I have the story just to get that attention again.
Right.
How do you strike a balance? How can parents really help them to share the real fun experience and not to just kind of come up with stories that have never happened?
You know, earlier we were talking about how parents assume that, okay, because my child has everything provided to them, they should, like, be the best child.
Right.
Like, what are you doing as a child? You don't have a job, you don't have anything to take care of. But what parents don't realize is that kids who are going to school are really working on their self-identity with how they present themselves and how others perceive them as well, which is a lot of work. Like, we as adults do this as well, right?
Right.
So I think maybe parents need to have conversations with their kids to explain that, you know, how is it benefiting you if you were going to, like, gas up your story and say you went to the best places. Like, how do you think the other child is going to feel in that way? You're building empathy in your child so that they also see that, wait, what's the goal? Like, how is it benefiting me to make up a story about where I went to? Like, you know, is it going to hurt the other child's feelings? Is it going to help me in any way? I don't know, but important questions for the kid to analyze as well, so that they're not making up false stories.
Right.
They're not presenting themselves as the best kid out there when what's the point of that, right?
Right.
I think that's an important question for a child to ask. If they want to come across as well loved and you know, needed by everyone around or accepted by everyone around, then are there other methods that you could do that? Maybe just by being a nice person, not bullying anyone, you know, offering help whenever someone else needs it. There's other methods to achieving the same goal.
Yeah. What about anxiety? There are going to be lots of kids who are going to go to school for the first time. Probably they're changing school, new classrooms, new friends. I'm sure there is anxiety.
100%.
How can you help the parents who can further help their kids to deal with it?
Once again, before your child even goes to school, sit down and have a conversation with them, you know, ask them how they're feeling. Don't come up with responses right away. I would say give your child different tools, like, let's say, different plans as to what to do when you're feeling anxious. Here's a method that I use for myself, and I always recommend this to kids, is the ice method, right?
Okay.
So having, like, ice water or something would kind of help you redirect your thoughts when you're feeling anxious, because it helps regulate your nervous system. For adults, sometimes I say pop the ice cube into your mouth, because it kind of just, like, shocks your brain into focusing on the ice.
I'm going to try
rather
that.
than
The brain freeze
right
is going to happen.
now, if ice is not accessible to you in school, obviously, like, you have your bottle of water with you, drink some water, focus on something else. I always say, like, do a breathing method, you know, have these grounding techniques ready, available, so parents can teach their kids this. Also have the option of calling your parents if you need. If it's really not for you and you need to, have an escape route, you know. If you're going to imagine a parent that says, okay, you're going to school class, I'll see you later, and the kid feels scared to call their parent. Now, as a parent, I would say, why is your child afraid to call you and ask? That says a lot about you as a parent, right? Are you not holding space for your child to be able to call you and say, hey, I'm terrified, I need you to help me?
Yeah.
You want to have that your kid to have that access to you as
Right,
well.
right.
So that's another option. I would say maybe some sensory toys as well. Like,
Okay.
and when we say sensory toys, these are like items that would help you calm your senses down. I always have this hairband on me because sometimes I don't do anything with it, but it's like a little calming device that I always have with me. So if I feel anxious,
That's
I
your
know it's
thing.
like it's with me all the time,
Oh.
right?
Oh.
I've had kids who have like little fidget toys with them in their pockets, and I just want to say, school sometimes teachers take this away
Yeah.
from kids, which is horrible.
Yeah.
Which once again, teachers
They
need to
be
make
aware.
these provisions for
Yeah.
these children, because it's not distracting the child; it's helping the child focus, right?
Right.
Schools sometimes expect children to sit in their seat and just concentrate on one thing, when if your child has ADHD, let's say, and they need to move around, maybe do something that's active before you want to sit down and concentrate. Maybe give the child a task like cleaning the board, or just walk to the bathroom and come back. That way at least the child's needs are being met, rather than
Right.
them being forced to
Right.
mask these needs as
Right.
well, right?
Right. Right.
But yeah, those are like a few tips for parents to talk to their
Do you
kids
think
about.
there are programs for, like, in schools where you actually share this awareness with teachers so that they can do better? Are there any programs?
It's me. I still do workshops in different schools as well, for teachers, for parents, for kids, and I really think schools need to budget more for mental health issues like this as well, because the more awareness, the better students you're gonna have, as
And
well
you
as
spend majority of your day there.
and the better adults you're sending out into the world as well, right? Yeah, and I think it saves a lot of time of like, why wait for something bad to happen and then you're going to get help? Have these resources available for you. So yes, I would offer workshops in different schools and companies as well, where we have conversations like this. We spread awareness. Like, now that I'm having these conversations with you both, you're going to have these conversations with other people as well.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's how it spreads. That's how
Right.
we all become more self-aware individuals, right? But yeah, definitely, I'm open to more workshops if just more people would understand the need
Importance
for
of this.
these as well.
Yeah.
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 Wow. Well, another very random question. How would you help a kid who is very scared of the parents at home, is dealing with a certain thing in the class, cannot
Yeah.
really share it with their friends, and doesn't want to go to the teacher also and speak to him or her?
Okay.
So what does this child technically do? Like, if you just had to give a little advice and you have to say that, okay,
Yeah.
this is probably is what you can try.
This is really difficult, and I've actually had a lot of kids, teenagers, even adults reach out to me on social media, and it's a boundary that I have to set, because it's also I can't have a session through social media like that, right? But I would offer them resources on what to do to help yourself, rather than struggling on your own. Because once you hit that low spot of thinking that you're the only one that's feeling like this, it's a very lonely space, and it's one that I've been in as well as a
Oh.
kid, where you don't know who to reach out to, right?
Yeah.
I think that if you're as a child, if your parents are not available for you, your teachers are not available, try to find a support system, maybe through friends, maybe through working on it on your own. Like, as a child, I would say maybe music might help, maybe finding a hobby and then finding people through that could help. But I like to visually imagine it as like a mental health toolkit that you're building, right? In my toolkit, I have my therapist, I have my friends, my cats, a visualization of the beach, collecting rocks, whatever it is. You dip into that and you pick what you need for yourself. Some people might not have their parents or their friends. Then what other resources can you collect and build, and choose what you want to do for yourself at a time like that. But I feel really sorry that there are individuals who
Yeah.
don't
And-
know who to reach
And
out
very
to.
often these kids really don't have access to this step as to what to do. Like,
Yeah.
right now, if somebody's watching the episode, they know that, okay, she exists on Instagram, maybe I can reach out to her and she can help me out.
Yeah.
But not everybody knows that who should you really go and speak to about it.
Yeah.
Or
Which
like-
is why I think we need to keep talking about mental health, good
Yeah.
mental health, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people still there is obviously a stigma everywhere in the world,
Yeah.
right? We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to admit that we're struggling.
Yeah.
We want to present as we've all got this together to
Yeah.
everybody, but
Yeah.
what happens if you do actually admit that you're struggling? There's people who reach out to you. There's resources that are available to you at that point, and it doesn't make you any weaker if you were to be vulnerable,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
it's men's mental health as well is really important. You'll see that so many men in different cultures and society don't want to open up because they're perceived as weak, right? These notions need to be changed. Like they're old, they're outdated, and we need to change them up to talk about mental health.
Yeah.
Like a man can cry too, and it's perfectly all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I sometimes will, like, when I'm in a good mental space, I don't, or so when I'm in a bad mental space, right, I won't vent to my friends right away. I'll also check in on them and ask, hey, do you have the ability to talk to me right now? And sometimes they'll say, no, I can't, because even I'm not in a good mental space. I'm like, all right, cool. And then I'll reach out to
But
other
that's a good
resources.
practice.
Wow.
You
Yeah.
check
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, before you went out.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Sometimes I'll have clients come in and they're like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." But like, thank you for asking me. And,
Oh, that's sweet.
I'm honest as a therapist. I'm like, nah, actually, honestly, my day was kind of bad, but like, we
Yeah.
got this. Let's do this session.
Yeah.
And then we both realize that I'm now slipping into a client therapist
Yeah.
mode. But
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be a square therapist who's like, "Yeah, I'm perfect. I've got all of this together." When
Yeah.
I'm human too. So they
Yeah.
understand that. But I think it's really cute that they're like, "Are you okay?"
Well,
I was
talking
like,
about
yeah.
school and talking about that they're going back to school after the summer break, very soon
Yeah.
the exams are also going to be there. Now, as a parent, you want your child to excel and you want your child to really get those good marks,
Yeah.
right? But at the same time, you also don't want to pressurize your child, right? There are times when you actually feel that no, the child should actually be studying at the moment, but at the same time, the child is like, I've already done my homework and I'm pretty confident
Very
about
common
it.
thing. Which
Right.
happens,
Yeah, so how do you really balance that out where you stop comparing your child with the others, where, oh my god, this one is already on the third revision and you not even finished one revision.
Maybe
Right.
that for the child, one revision
Vision
is
is more than enough.
right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So how do you actually?
And the child knows that. He's like, I got
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Okay, I think comparison is so unhealthy if you're doing it in a way where, like, let's say a parent's comparing their child to make them feel bad. Negative motivation is not helping anyone, right? Comparison is good to an extent if you're learning from the other person. Like if I'm seeing someone do much better than me and I'm like, okay, I'm comparing myself because I want to learn how I can improve myself, well, go ahead and compare yourself, then that's fine. But if I'm going to compare myself to demean myself and make myself feel worse, then how is that helping me, right? Parents need to understand that when you're comparing your child, why are you doing it? Like, with what benefit? Are you hurting your child more than actually motivating them? And if you want to motivate them, are there other healthier methods to do so? Like, let's say if you want to motivate your child to study more, you can ask them, hey, what do you think you're going to, do in the future? If you want to, let's say, be an engineer or a doctor, whatever it is, or a therapist, how can you work towards that? So then your child is intentionally wanting to study because it's for their own good, not because you're forcing them to do so, right? Who wants to do something that they're forced to constantly all the time? Also, parents need to understand that different children have different learning capabilities and different needs, right? We're not all the same. So if your child, let's say, like you said, does one revision and they are able to retain that, trust them on it, work with them, do like mock tests together. But if your child is struggling in, like, let's say, math, when I was a kid, I was so bad at math. Like, I have a finance degree sitting in the back that's useless, but I hated math, and everyone made me feel like I was such a bad student because I was bad at math. But I was great in biology and chemistry and all of these other subjects that nobody pushed me to do those things. They were only talking about how bad I was at one thing. And I always say this to parents. I'm like, maybe your child is just not good at this one subject. How can you support them to manage to just pass through it? You don't have to
But
get
what is the
100.
confidence that they are actually going with when they're going to the parents and when they say that I'm okay with one revision and it doesn't match the
Great.
Then
the parent needs to not shame their child, not hold that pressure against them, and help them understand, okay, look, you did your one revision and this is the result. Like, what do you think we can do to do better next time? Because it's benefiting you, not because I'm telling you to get a better grade to look good for other people around you. You see? It's really how you word it when you talk to your child. Because if you're going
I think also discipline is the key, right? If you really have that discipline, that schedule, that routine for the children.
Yes. Okay. With discipline, I do want to say, like, I follow this method called time blocking. and I
Okay.
won't show you my calendar because it looks like a crazy person's calendar. But I will block time for different things that like are important to me, including
Okay.
making time for myself. Right
Nice.
now, when people say you need to have a schedule, you don't have to have a fixed, consistent schedule, right? That changes because life is constantly changing. There's different things that are coming at you
Right.
that some you can't really account time for. So you have the flexibility of moving things around in your calendar, right? Now, for a child who has like a fixed school schedule, let's
Right.
say, I think it's important to also schedule in time for the child to just relax. To just
Not do anything.
not do anything, to just do whatever they want to do, you know, because if you're going to constantly plug into your children's calendar one thing after another, they're not getting time to breathe. And just like you as an adult, as a parent, sometimes you just want to sit and stare at a wall and do nothing. Right? Your child is not lazy for wanting to do that. That's a need that they have, right? And if they are going out of their way to, you know, not exhibit good behavior, then instead of shaming them, maybe ask them, what is it that you're not getting? Like,
Right.
how can I help support you as a parent,
Right.
rather than making you feel bad for this, right? Like, let's say if a child is acting up in school, right, and is behaving really badly, bullying other kids, and you as a parent, instead of yelling at your child, 100% no to any sort of physical correction, right? No beating your children. But if you were to sit down and have a conversation with your child and say, what is it that you're actually seeking, right? Maybe your child will actually open up and say, I actually wanted more attention. That's why I did that. I didn't want to actually hurt anyone. I just kind of wanted this. Then you figure out, how do you get your child more attention in that way, right? But better
Again, communication.
conversation
Yeah.
I
rather
think
than
it's about
shaming.
giving the child more power, more authority, the feeling of responsibility.
Yes. Like kind of what you said earlier, right? If you want to promote independence in your child,
Make them feel
you as a
heard.
parent, you have to let go. This is how I look at it as adults. Like, how did we learn when we were kids not to touch fire, right? There's different versions of learning, different ways we take in information. It can either be through personal experiences. Maybe I'll burn my hand and then I'm like, ouch,
Yeah,
don't,
yeah,
I shouldn't
that's
touch
how you
fire.
learn.
Maybe I don't need to burn my hand. Maybe my parents are like, hey, trust me, it's
Yeah.
hot, don't touch it, you know?
Experience.
And then, yeah, maybe their own experience, or maybe somebody told them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I trust my parents to not, I'm not going to touch this fire. Or maybe I could learn through friends, through social media, through teachers, school, whatever it is. But it's a piece of information that I've learned through any other way that I've taken it in, right? Now, even then, if I want to go touch fire and test it for myself, let your child make mistakes sometimes, you
That's
know?
how you learn.
That's on
Because
them.
if you're gonna, yeah, if you're gonna like helicopter parent your child and constantly tell them what to do, then you're not giving them any sort of authority in the future to make decisions for
Yeah.
themselves,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Then as an adult, you can be like when your child turns into an adult, you can be like, why are you not getting anything done? Maybe it's because when your child was younger, you did everything for them. Now don't like blame your child for not being able to be responsible,
Yeah.
when partially it was your responsibility to let go and let
Yeah.
your child figure it out as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I want to say that with exams coming up, a lot of parents are so scared of, I understand it, you're so scared of your child failing
Yeah.
a subject because it's a lot of money that goes into school and all
Yeah.
of that. Try and find healthier methods to understand your child's learning capabilities so that they can take in information in a good way where they're actually learning,
Yeah.
not just like, I don't know, robotically sucking up information without actually processing any of it.
Yeah.
So if your child does fail every now and then, don't shame
It's
them for
okay.
it. You know, teach them that, okay, let's see what you did wrong. How can we learn from that going forward, rather than making them feel so bad that I've seen this with a lot of children, that they're so scared to tell their parents anything.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to like have that relationship with your parents where you're so scared to even say, hey, I need help. I think that's
Yeah.
something parents need to come face to face with is
Yeah.
imagine your
Probably
child
because they
being
must
scared.
have had that kind of an experience that once when the complaint went, the result wasn't that great. That maybe they had that
Right.
where the parents must have shouted, they must have done
Trauma.
something, they
Yeah.
must have done something very extreme. So the next time the child is never going to open up.
Yeah.
But then for parents, if you ask, the justification is that if I wouldn't have behaved that way, that message
you
would have
hadn't
never gone
shared it.
across. The child would have been like, he's okay with everything.
Yeah,
So that's
exactly.
again, I think that's communication. That's a lot to do
Yeah.
with the balance and what you
It's the
really
right way to
practice
do
at
it.
home as well. Yeah.
Whenever I give this piece of advice to parents during parent counseling, I'm almost always met with this second question, follow-up question, which is, okay, but then how do I tell my child that I'm
Yeah.
upset? And
Yeah.
I'm like, tell your child that there are consequences to different things, right? If your child has lied to you and you take away their PlayStation,
Yeah.
how is that benefiting the child? Are they learning anything from it? But
They want
maybe.
them to learn a lesson.
Sure. Okay. You want to learn a lesson? Take away the PS5, but tell them why and do it to explain why you're doing it. Say, hey, I'm very upset that you lied to me, and there has to be a consequence to what's happened, right?
Right.
So I'm not going to give you the authority to choose what your punishment needs to be. There needs to be no punishment, right? There needs to be a consequence. And if you've lied to me, I'm going to take away your PS5 because I will give it back to you in a day, and you need to reflect on what you've done in this
Right.
one day.
Yeah.
You see how that's going to be?
That's so different.
Yeah.
Your
That
child's
just-
going to learn from that rather than being like, oh, you know what? The next time I'm going to hide it better when I lie rather
Exactly.
than telling
Yeah.
my parent that I've made a mistake.
Yeah, because often what happens is that when kids are disrespectful, or when they're not, when the friends are around, and it's kind of an embarrassment for the
Yeah.
parents as
They
well.
say something
They tend to
inappropriate.
take some really extreme steps
Yep.
where the
And
child
sometimes
probably
even do it
doesn't.
publicly.
Yeah, very true. Which technically, if you look at it, and I'm sure that you would agree for it, that it in the long run, it always stays with you.
It's
Like that memory,
embarrassing.
yeah, that
Yeah.
bad memory will always stay with you. That, oh my God, this was the consequence of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My biggest advice for parents is to just treat your child like not like your property, but like an
Yeah.
actual individual, like a small mini version
you.
who you need to have conversations
Yeah.
with, right? Because if
Yeah.
you were to publicly shame your child, slap them, hit them, yell at them in public, that's so embarrassing. Put yourself in your child's place.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in that position at all. It's very embarrassing.
Yeah.
And that, you're right, that trauma can then move on to your adulthood as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna go seek therapy and a whole other. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to do the rapid fire?
Yes, I don't have a lot, but then I'll probably just wing it.
All
Do
right.
you have anything that you're taking?
Let's do
Wait,
this.
I didn't know there was a rapid fire, but now my
Yeah, but this is
anxiety
gonna be
is
good
like-
surprise.
Basically, a rapid fire is that we're just
Okay.
looking for the very short answers
Okay.
and quick tips or quick tricks, something that we can
All right,
practice.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
Go
thinking
for it.
what? Wait, I'm still thinking. I don't have questions. I'm just seeing what I can ask.
Really, I mean, even I don't have any particular rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw it. Like questions like, what are the 3 best parenting tips that you feel that the parents really need to incorporate in today's time?
Okay, so first one would be treating your child like an actual individual, listening to your child and asking them for their opinion, and I would say spend quality time with your child. Find out what their love language is, what they need, Some children really crave physical touch, physical hugs from their parents. Sometimes parents, I've noticed, I've seen this in the past, like they're uncomfortable hugging their child. What other ways can you show your child what they need, what their needs are, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What's the most unexpected learning from a client as a therapist for you?
Unexpected learning, like what I have learned
From
as
a client.
therapist. From a client.
From a client.
Interesting. This isn't very rapid fire. What I have learned from a client, okay, I would say is that everything I've learned as a professional, as a therapist, is constantly changing and growing as the generations go by. I'm learning a lot from my clients as well. Sometimes they'll say something and I realize that as a therapist, my thoughts are changing, and I'm expanding my thoughts. I'm learning new perceptions, and I think holding that space for myself and not being so rigid and saying I'm a therapist and this is my rules and this is what I am helps me grow as a therapist as well.
Okay. How can parents help their children deal with anxiety before a very big event? A quick tip.
Healthy conversation with them, hear them out. Sometimes just talking about why they're feeling anxious takes away a big part of their anxiety as well. Also, when I talk to clients about anxiety, I always say that there's 2 kinds, right? One is where you don't push yourself through because that will traumatize you even more. Like, I don't like heights. I wouldn't go bungee jumping because I would die 2 seconds into that jump. But I know that I'm also scared of public speaking, and I would do it because I know I'm benefiting from it, right? So I'm choosing where I can push myself and where I'm definitely like, nope, I don't want to do it.
Got it.
Give your child options. I
Right.
would say give them tools, maybe physical tools, sensory toys that they can hold on to. Give them options to reach
Right.
out to you so that you're accessible to them as well.
When do you actually go in for therapy? When do you, as a parent, you're like, okay, I conversation is not happening with this child.
Yeah.
Now I need to go for therapy. When do you actually come to that point that, hey, we need therapy, the child and I?
Yeah, I always encourage parents to tell their children that this is an option that's available, right? I've had kids come and say, oh, I'm not crazy. I don't want a therapist. I'm not cuckoo. I don't want to come to a clinic. All these terms that are so stigmatized, right? And I think I've also had a good share of parents who talk to their kid and say, I can't figure it out. You can't figure it out. Let's go find a professional who can figure it out
That's nice,
together.
Vidika.
And
Again,
to these
communication.
kids, to these kids, I wouldn't use the word therapist or psychologist. I'll say I'm an emotional coach and I'm going to help guide you because I help a lot of kids like this.
Right.
'Cause-
Right.
And then I'll give them personal stories. I'm like, I didn't know what to do when I was a kid. So now I know. So I want to teach all of you kids as
Yeah.
well. And that way they're more open to it as
Right.
well.
Very interesting.
A quick
Yeah.
trick for children to focus on their homework or studies. How can they really get their focus? Because you often get distracted, right?
Very
Even
easy.
you, when you do your normal work, you often get distracted and you'll get up or you'll have a
Yes.
coffee or do something. But for kids who are trying to study, and how can they really focus?
Be aware of your needs. A question I always ask my kid clients whenever they come into a session is, how's your energy today? Both the physical aspect and your mental aspect.
Okay.
Sometimes, let's say even for us as adults, our physical energy is a lot, but our focusing energy mentally is really good, right? Okay, so what can you do after that? Maybe I need to go for a run and then come back and I'll concentrate more. Maybe the opposite. Maybe my physical energy is so low and my mental energy is like really high, right? The opposite way, maybe I need to just nourish myself, eat some good food, and then I can sit down and do things. So be more aware of your physical and your mental energy,
Wow.
and that way you can choose what you want to do, how you
Right.
can help yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Since we spoke about this earlier, in just one thing to do whether you're a child, whether you're a teenager or an adult, when we want to just stop comparing ourselves to others, what's one thing that we should think?
My favorite question to ask is, how is it benefiting me? If I'm going to compare, like I said earlier, if I'm going to compare and make myself feel worse, then how is that helping me? If I'm going to look at someone and say, wow, I really like that they're doing this, maybe I'll reach out to them and be like, hey, what can I learn from you? How can I benefit from this, right? I think key point is self-compassion. I'm not going to put myself down to make anyone else feel better. I'm going to see, how can I improve? Because, like I said earlier, I'm constantly changing and growing. And I think if the ability to hold space for yourself so that you're not just one person constantly helps you understand that you have the potential to make mistakes, to fail, to learn, to grow, and keep going.
Right.
All right. How does a parent manage the screen time for their kids?
Oh, this is really difficult. I think even as an
Is
adult,
there a
I
rule?
can
Is
manage
there-
screen
is-
time for
yeah.
myself.
I mean, like, I understand, but then is there a rule that only 1 hour you'll get, or only
Yeah.
when we're busy you get to play the games on the phone?
Yeah.
How do you really manage that screen time? Because I know that's an episode in itself.
Yeah. Sometimes screen time helps kids as well with like multitasking, with concentrating, right? To do tasks. And I think it really depends on what you're putting into your brain as well. If your kid's gonna constantly play shooting games and like really like games that are not benefiting them in any way and can be benefiting them for fun, but
Okay.
if it's gonna make you a worse person and they're using bad language, they're being more aggressive, then obviously the amount of screen time they have for a particular game is not healthy for them, right? Completely taking away screen time is also not good because it's everywhere. You're
Yeah.
exposed to it. Your kid's gonna get it from somewhere or the other. I think having with the time blocking method that I explained, having a certain amount of time,
Time
and
for
if your
everything.
kid sometimes doesn't need screen time, let them have the option of saying, you know what, I actually want to go out and play, and I don't want to do screen time right now, and they can move that screen time to another hour, another day,
Yeah.
and bunch that together with another screen time hour. I think
Fair
giving
enough.
kids the option to move things around would also help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One final personal question, you have something else?
No, I mean, like, do you have any activities to bond with the children? Something that you would suggest that they should do? 5 activities that parents can incorporate to bond with their children.
Okay, I'm not going to do 5.
3, can I
Because
ask?
I think that depends on the child and the individual.
Something that comes to your mind,
right?
something that they can incorporate here in Oman.
In Oman, okay. I think getting out in nature is a really good activity
So,
to
okay,
do.
I'll ask 3.
Yeah, okay, 3 is good. Getting out in nature to
Wait,
do
I'll
things.
ask. Okay. Yeah. Okay. 3 fun. 3 fun activities that you can that parents can bond with their children.
3 fun activities parents can do to bond with their kids.
Yeah.
Okay.
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 Three fun activities that parents can incorporate to bond with their children
Okay.
here in Oman.
And vice versa for the kids to bond with their parents as well,
perfect,
I'm
yeah.
going to say, okay? I think it's really important to not pick things that you think is best for your child. Ask your child what they want to do as well, right? I remember as a kid being forced to go to karate, and I was like, I hate this. I don't want to do this.
Dude, even
Then-
I've done karate.
Yeah, I was like, I wanna-
I think from grade
We've
3
all
to
done
grade 8.
karate.
Yeah, and I was made to wear the same, what do you call
Yeah.
the same karate costume as my sister. My mom was like, oh, you already have a costume, you go for karate.
Right? Okay, so I'll say, okay, for the top 3 activities, one would be nature. Get out in
Okay.
nature, explore. I think when
Okay.
you explore and y'all are both asking questions, it's a great way to bond with your child. And nature could be like you go to water, go into like the wadis, whatever it is, so you're exploring. Maybe do something that's a volunteer opportunity together as well. There's not as many opportunities here in Oman. If anyone wants to reach out for like animal rescue stuff, I have options there. You can go walk a dog, rescue a dog together, feed some stray animals together. That's a great option because then you're expressing, challenging them to be more
Yeah.
empathetic as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And the third option I would say is maybe ask your child what they want to do. Let them pick. It could be like the silliest option of like, hey, I want to have a tea party. I want to play with clay. Get into that. We as adults, I think, forget to be children sometimes. 'Cause
Yeah.
we didn't have that as kids sometimes, and we forget to treat ourselves as kids. Go to the beach, go play, do something really silly that your child wants to do. So then it's giving them the option to make a decision as
Right.
well.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Wow.
I don't think I could have come
Great.
up with 5.
With so many things that
Yeah.
I actually picked up from the conversation, and the key highlights, if you ask me, were
Self-awareness.
self-awareness, self-compassion, and communication. Always
Absolutely.
talk to your loved ones, talk to your parents, talk to your kids. And yeah, I think a lot can be sorted if you just have that
a good conversation.
Yeah.
That's all.
Which
And we had a great
I
conversation.
know, yeah, we had a lovely conversation. I mean, I can go on and on and on and make more episodes with you
I
because
can
I
go
have
on
a
and on.
lot. I have a lot to ask.
Yeah.
Because I have, couple therapy probably could be one. The relationship with the parents when the kids have grown up. So there are a
Yeah.
lot of things, but I'm sure we're going to
can get
invite
into
you
that.
again.
Yes,
Yeah.
totally.
Yes.
But for now, for today, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I
for
love having
enlightening
these
us.
conversations.
Yeah.
I could go on as well.
could we.
We will continue this conversation.
You have great energy,
Yes.
trust me.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was lovely
Thank you.
speaking to
Thank
you.
you so much for joining us, Tamsin.
All the best with the stuff that you're doing. You guys take good care of yourself.
Talk
Keep
more
investing.
often.
Yeah. And if you're going back to school, enjoy. These are the fun times. That's all.